Hey everyone, it's Marvin. Thanks so much for listening to Books and Boba. I just wanted to take a quick second to remind you that Books and Boba just launched our Patreon to help support our future endeavors. Vera and I have been running Books and Boba for the last 6.5 years, and we've always talked about wanting to do more, including expanding our content offerings, being able to go to book events and do more coverage. And so to help us get closer to those ambitions, we started a Patreon to help us grow and to better support books by Asian and Asian American authors. We are offering 2 tiers for our Patreon. The first is our regular Boba member coming in at $3 a month, which will give you access to our brand new Books and Boba Discord server so you can engage with your fellow Books and Boba Club members and also Rira and myself in real time. This is where we'll be aiming to move the bulk of our book club discussions, but rest assured we'll still have a presence on Goodreads as well. And our premium tier is our Honey Boba member tier coming in at $5 a month, where in addition to access to our Discord server, you'll also get access to our monthly Boba Chats, a bonus podcast where Rira and I and some guests will get together each month and have a more casual discussion on stuff that may or may not be book related, as well as answer some listener Q&A. Honey Boba members will also have access to a poll to help decide an official Books and Boba book pick once per quarter. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, support Books and Boba on Patreon by going to patreon.com/booksandboba. As always, Rira and I really appreciate your support. All right, thanks for listening, and I'm on with the show.
You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
Hey, welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing our April 2023 book club pick, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto, a murder mystery featuring a fiery auntie, which appears to be Jessie Q. Sutanto's favorite character to write. It's also May, so Rira, happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, the 1 month where we exist in the eyes of corporate America.
I feel like corporate America got on it a little bit quicker this time around. I feel like I started to see more pitches back in like early April, so good on them, I guess.
That being said, on the first day of APAM, I did get like literally 3 pitches for books by white authors.
I mean, it is what it is.
But yeah, we are here to discuss our April book club pick. We are coming in a little bit late this month for many reasons, chief among which is I had my delayed wedding reception this past Saturday, which Rira was also a part of. And so was kind of busy last week. So appreciate your patience.
And that was on the same day as Y'all West. And the week before that was Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, which you went to. I didn't because I went on a spontaneous trip to Vegas for my birthday. It like literally came up with the idea maybe like 2 days before we left, and we weren't sure if we were going to go like until the day we left. So when Marvin was like, "Hey, are you free?" It's like, "Are you free to record?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to be here." That
sounds like a classic Vegas trip story, though. But yeah. Thanks.
This was only my second time going to Vegas, so I don't really have much of a, like as people may know who follow us on social media, they probably saw me with like my giant sword full of margarita, and like since this was my second time going, I was like, I actually didn't really drink that much the first time I went. I've never had like a Fat Tuesday or any of the like novelty drinks. So I was like, so when I saw people walking past me with these giant swords filled with margaritas, I was like, that looks so stupid. I need to get it. So
yeah. Well,
so yeah, fun last half of April, which, kind of pushed us back. And also we were launching our Patreon, and we also had other episodes to do. So scheduling wise, it has taken a while for us to get here.
Yeah, you're probably getting this episode immediately following our Victoria Ying author chat episode. We have a ton of stuff in the bank and a ton of stuff to still record. So yeah, Books and Boba, where the pipeline is full. And like we were mentioned, we also did launch our Patreon, and thanks to everyone who's supported us so far. I think right now we actually have enough to cover at least our monthly hosting costs. So, slowly building that following. But, if you want to hear more from us, including our new special podcast, Boba Chats, join us on Patreon, where you can also join our new Discord server, where you can talk to me and Vera whenever you want. But yeah, again, thank you for your patience and waiting for this discussion. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about this book because, man, it caused a lot of feelings. I don't know about you, but I was physically feeling anti-anxiety while reading this book, so I'm very excited to get into it.
All right, so we're going to start off with the book jacket description, and then we'll get into it. Put the kettle on, there's a mystery brewing. Tea shop owner, matchmaker, detective, 60-year-old self-proclaimed tea expert Vera Wong enjoys nothing more than sipping a good cup of oolong and doing some healthy detective work on the internet, aka checking up on her son to see if he's dating anybody yet. But when Vera wakes up one morning to find a dead man in the middle of her tea shop, it's going to take more than a strong Longjing to fix things. Knowing she'll do a better job than the police possibly could, because nobody sniffs out a wrongdoing quite like a suspicious Chinese mother with time on her hands, Vera decides it's down to her to catch the killer.
Yeah. So before we get started, this is your first and final spoiler warning. As always, we discuss the entire story and plot of our monthly book club pick, which means this being a murder mystery, we will be spoiling who the killer is. So if you have not finished the book yet and still plan to, finish the book first and then come back and listen to the rest of our discussion. But with that said...
Also, I would like to give out a content warning. There is a character who is emotionally abusive and manipulative as a partner, so just proceed with caution while you are listening to this episode.
Yeah. All right. So with that said, let's get into it. What do you think of this book, Vera?
Okay, so obviously, I thought this was going to be a cozy mystery, right? Because there's a murder and you have like this 60-year-old woman who is like nosy. I was like, okay, Miss Marples, but with like an Asian auntie as like the heroine. But it was actually more of like a found family contemporary comedy drama. So I was pretty surprised at the lack of like Poirot murder vibes, but I did really like the slice of life aspect and like the found family aspect of the story. I was surprised that the book had multiple POVs. I thought this book was going to be written in like one POV from Vera's perspective, but I'm glad that it didn't, because it gave me like better insight on like how other people view Vera. So that was like my first I guess that's like my first reaction, my initial reaction to the book.
I did not expect 5 whole POV characters in this book. It was like every chapter when there was a new POV character, I was like, oh, there's another one. This book has like the POV depth of like a epic fantasy like novel, right?
I don't know if it's like epic fantasy novel scale, but it is quite big.
Yeah. I really liked that like throughout, especially the middle of the book, sometimes you do forget that it is a murder mystery. Although Vera always goes back to her crime notebook where she's trying to suss out all the suspects. I do want to talk about like Vera as a character herself, because like we mentioned before, Jessie Q Sutanto is really good at writing auntie characters that, like, at least for me, creates like a visceral physical reaction. Like all the chapters that feature Vera's point of view, where you get into the mind of an auntie who is headstrong, doesn't take any criticism, and like is so sure of her own like superiority and correctness. just brought me back to, maybe it's because I've been dealing with family all weekend because of my wedding reception.
Oh yeah, it's 100% because of that, because you literally were surrounded by aunties and family all weekend. And, them bringing on the classic, like, oh my God, now that you're finally married, like, when are you going to have a kid? And bringing up all the classics, when it comes to auntie talk.
Yeah, I mean, reading this book it brought those feelings that were already on the surface, like, to the forefront. I literally had, like, physical cringe reactions while reading this book.
So I actually read this book half through audiobook. And I was listening to it in my car with my partner, Dan, and I had to explain the concept of aunties to him. It was very funny because he was like, wait, so like when you guys call like older people auntie, they're not related to you. So like, why is that like a title that you use? And then we talk, and then it like morphed into this conversation of how come like in American language, we don't really have like a title for older people other than like grandpa and grandma, and they're not really like flattering terms of titles.
Yeah, I mean, did you come up with an explanation? Because all I can think of is just culture. Like, we're taught to respect elders, and elders take advantage of that.
I didn't really say like elders take advantage of that, but
they do, though.
I mean, everyone takes advantage of each other. I mean, old people here in America and as well as old people elsewhere. So I felt like that was like a very like obvious thing that I didn't have to explain. But I was just like, oh, like, auntie is just a term that you use to familiarize yourself, to endear yourself to someone older. Usually when you need something from them or they're trying to like have conversation with you. I don't know. It's like, it's weird because I feel like Korean aunties are very different from like Chinese aunties.
I mean, I'm not sure. It feels like it's kind of similar. I mean, I feel like, at least for me, growing up, aunties and uncles have been the term of endearment, general term of endearment for any elders, specifically like friends of family who are part of our community, right? Like, these are the people that our parents hang out with, that we see on a regular basis, especially for immigrants. Having that community and having that like kind of semi-familial relationship is important.
Yeah, it's very much like a found family situation, like you said.
Yeah. And I mean, having that semi-familial relationship also, I guess, essentially gives, aunties and these aunties and uncles the right to criticize and praise and treat you as if you were family. And we kind of see that through the character of Vera. She kind of essentially takes in this band of, I guess, misfits / suspects and aunties them. And we see this, we see this meddlesome personality from the very beginning. The entire first chapter, we see her, waking up, criticizing her son for like not being filial, talking with her one customer, and like praising him for raising his sons well. It was just a lot of really familiar beats, actually.
Yeah, I saw a couple of like similarities with like Korean ajumas who they do like. Usually they brag about their own kids, but if there isn't anything to brag about, then they're like, oh my goodness, your son or daughter are like so filial and so successful. But the whole like mindset of like a middle-aged, older Asian woman just being like, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to get it, I'm going to strong arm my opinion over others, and it doesn't matter. I feel like that is like a very like Asian cultural thing. I actually joked with Dan in the car. I was like, oh, I actually do want to be like an older auntie, because by that point I can do whatever I want and no one will stop me. Like, I have earned that right in seniority of just like, you listen to me, youngsters. Like, I've spent my entire life being subservient to like the patriarchy or whatever, or, you know, the bare minimum of it. So you listen to me, youngsters. I'm like a badass auntie now, but I'm not there yet.
And there's something about like an auntie who only hears and sees and accepts what she wants to hear, see, and accept in the face of logic or laws. That is very like, I have family members who are just like that. And, you know, something that, and I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I do like that in this story, we do see that it is a front. You know, you kind of get the sense of that to begin with, which is like this headstrong auntie persona is something that Vera puts on because her life isn't really going the way that she wants or she wanted to and the way that she expected as an older Chinese woman. And, you know, I complained a little bit when we talked to Jessie Cusanto on her author chat about how, like, in her first book, Dial A for Aunties, there's no real auntie catharsis moment. But she did give that to us here, which I was very happy about. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I guess we should move on to the central driving plot of the story, which is the murder, which actually, before we get there, I did want to point out a joke that I really enjoyed in the first chapter, which is the reveal of Vera Wong's tea shop, which is Vera Wang's world-famous tea house. And I can't remember how many people I introduced to this book who thought that this was a book about Vera Wang, the dressmaker. And the fact that that joke made it into the book itself is, I thought it was pretty funny self-aware moment and a prime example of like auntie grift, right? Like the auntie logic that leads to naming a shop after a more famous person for the name recognition.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's just like an auntie grift. I think that's just like an Asian grift. I feel like I feel like any immigrant who wants to, you know, like get a business started, like they'll find any grift, they'll find any way to capitalize on getting as much publicity as possible. But
yeah, and
I did think it was very funny, the joke with Vera Wang.
And I totally, at that point, the entire first like chapter or two with Vera, I was very much identifying with a character that doesn't even appear that much, which is her son Tilly, which is like, Mom, you gotta stop doing this. Mom, you gotta, like, it's not gonna work. That's fraud. You can't take the name of someone else and pass it off as your own. And
I feel like it is a great introduction to people who are unfamiliar with Asian aunties and like its various like branches. Because like for Dan, like he wasn't here when I first read the first chapter. So I feel like that would have given him like a clearer idea on like what an auntie is and like what their mindset is. Like just the fact that she's like, I wake up at 4:30 every morning. I should have been born a rooster, but I was born in the year of the pig. And then I go on my like 3-mile walk. I always walk briskly, always put sunscreen on, always put a visor on. And I'm just like, yep, that's an
auntie, all right.
Literally first chapter, a definition of an auntie. Let's go. You know who, like, you can picture her so well. And that's just like the beauty and comedy of it all.
Yeah. So Vera Wang wakes up one morning and finds a dead body in her tea house, clutching a USB drive. And she does like a classic auntie or older Asian person thing, which is, you know what? I've watched CSI. I've watched Law and Order. I know what to do. And proceeds to like prep the crime scene for the cops / maybe take a piece of evidence.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is like really funny compared to another cozy mystery book that we've read for this podcast. Mia P. Mansala's Arsenic and Adobo. I guess like it wasn't for book club. It was for an author interview. But the aunties in that book, they're like, oh, the restaurant is like a mess. We need to like start cleaning up. And the main character is like, no, like this is a crime scene. You can't just move things around and clean up. Whereas Vera in this book is like, I've watched CSI. I know that I'm not supposed to tamper with the crime scene, but she still tampers with it anyway.
Yeah,
I thought her idea of like sharpieing the body outline was just like so funny to me. I was just like, wow, it must have been like way more exact than like a tape outline.
Yeah, and also proceeds to auntie the cops who come to investigate by trying to get them to drink the tea that'll help them think clearer. I did appreciate all the tea education in this book because I don't know if people reading this off the shelf knows that there's such a wide breadth of teas, especially in Chinese culture.
Yeah, I mean, this is not your boba shop. It's an actual tea shop where, you know, you have like quote unquote exotic ingredients, rare ingredients. I guess that's a kinder way to say it. And you're supposed to actually take time to enjoy your cup of tea and not just down it like a shot of whiskey. So I feel like those types of tea shops, like I felt like I saw them more a couple years ago, but like because of gentrification, those businesses have definitely just kind of disappeared, especially during the pandemic too.
Yeah, I mean, these tea shops / like I guess apothecaries, it takes a specific type of customer to go and know what they're doing. But at the same time, like it is a type of business that I feel like is primed for like hipster clientele, right? Because literally it's like each tea that's served there is tailored to the customer, right? Like Vera is actually very good at like, actually, I don't know if she's very good at it. She's good at like diagnosing her clients based on her own auntie intuition / like imposing her views on other people. But she does make comforting teas, and her teas do provide like what her customers need at that exact moment. And so it's kind of cool to see that, you know, she is actually very good at what she does, but that she can't help but have that like auntie superiority about it. And I did love reading her frustration that the cops aren't bringing in a CSI team and things aren't exactly like the TV, and how because they're not moving the way that she wants them to, obviously they're incompetent.
Well, like from the get-go, she's like, this is a murder. And, you know, she like goes ahead and sharpies the body outline, and, you know, she finds a USB drive and she's like, oh, what is this? Like, gonna take it. Like, what kind of guy like just carries drugs around? And like those are the evidence that the police would have taken and been like, okay, yeah, this is definitely hinting at foul play. But because she took those evidences and tampered with it, they didn't take her seriously. And then she's just like, why aren't they taking me seriously? Like, don't they know that this is a murder? And I'm like, this is some reverse logic that's happening. It's
definitely like some like auntie logic, which is you caused a problem yourself and now you're blaming other people, but you caused this problem. I've literally had this argument with my literal aunt.
And when like her son finds out later, he's like, you didn't take the flash drive, did you? Like, what? Actually, no. Like backing up, like the way she calls her son and was just like, "Hey, I have this flash drive that I hypothetically took from a dead body. How would I hypothetically unlock it?" And her son's just like, "Don't put it in anything. Like it probably have spyware. It's probably illegal. Like what do you mean there was a dead body in your tea shop?" And I was like, wow, even though I've never experienced my family like dealing with a dead body, there's definitely been like that situation was very familiar.
And the fact that she's like, of course I didn't plug in my computer. Do you think I'm stupid? Like, again, a physical, visceral reaction to that like exchange. Because again, if you've ever dealt with like helping parents with IT stuff over the phone, you've felt this, like you've had this type of exchange, right?
I don't want to say it's just an Asian thing, but like the IT thing mixed in with Asian like
Pride
culture,
or ego
Asian
or
boomer pride culture. It is just like a cocktail that is it's very strong, and you
Right.
don't want to like drink it every single time.
Because Vera's most strongest trait is never admitting she's wrong, right? She refuses to admit she's ever wrong or her instincts are bad. And for the most part, it works for her, right? You know, her instincts is that this is a murder. and the police suck, so I must solve this.
Yeah, but the police gets there and they're like, this is not a murder. It looks like it's a heart attack or some kind of like, accidental death. And she's just like, how can you think that when, she already took the evidence away for the police to actually think that this could possibly be foul play. And I just thought it was like, I think Vera can be summarized as good intentions, bad execution, good instincts, but bad method. So, yeah.
I mean, good intentions, bad execution is kind of like the most classic Asian American trope, right? That's like every parent-child relationship in a lot of Asian American literature and media, right?
Yeah. But she does a smart thing of just like, oh, okay, well, if this is a murder, and it obviously is, the killer will come back to the scene of the crime. So all I have to do is wait for people to show up.
But she kind of forces the issue because she puts out an obituary for the deceased person who is identified as Marshall Chen, and draws the attention of 4 people who were connected to him prior to his death. And so these 4 people become her suspects, and they're Ricky, Sana, Oliver, and Julia. So Ricky is a coder from Indonesia who was taken advantage by Marshall on a project that they worked together on. Sana is an artist currently experiencing a creative block because of something Marshall did. Julia is Marshall's beleaguered wife and mother to his child who he had just left that morning. And Oliver is Marshall's identical twin brother who has lived his entire life in Marshall's shadow. And so these 4 characters become Vera's main suspects for the murder and also become our point of view characters for the rest of the book. So I guess, what did you think about the suspects?
I thought it was great that, we got other Asian ethnicities in there. And I did like how like Ricky and Sana, they pretend to be like crime reporters. Like Ricky pretends that he works for BuzzFeed, and Sana's like, oh, I have a true crime podcast. And it's like very obvious to Vera. It's just like, they are really bad at lying. I don't know what they're lying about, but they are very bad at lying. And I thought that was like pretty funny on how like they went about asking their questions while like lying very poorly about like why they're asking these questions. And I really liked Julia's POV because I felt like her voice was probably like the strongest to me. Because like in the beginning, she sounds so insecure, like everything, like she sounds so skittish. Everything sets her off. And because you know that she is Marshall's widow, you immediately know that like this was not a healthy relationship. And as you get like the other POVs from the other suspects, you piece together how shitty Marshall is as a human being. So I thought like Jesse Q. Santanto did like a very good job in getting into the mindset of like a victim of emotional abuse and long-term emotional abuse at that. And how that affects not just you as a person and your career and your relationship with other people, but also like how you value yourself. So I thought that Julia probably had like the strongest voice out of the other characters. My second favorite is probably Sana, because she has an interesting relationship with her mother, because her mother is like this big shot author who like publishes 4 books a year, who has like an HBO show under her belt, and she's very much proud of being like, well, I'm not like those other Asian mom. I'm a cool Asian mom who lets my kid do art and believe that they can do whatever they want. And she's like, and she believes like, oh, writer's block, creative block, that doesn't exist. It's like will over, it's just mind power. And I'm like, okay, well, that is a different level of,
Yeah, I did enjoy the fact that even if like not being a typical Asian parent doesn't mean you don't have typical Asian parent.
Oh,
tendency,
yeah.
Right?
She's like, I'm not a typical Asian mom. I'm like, I don't know. You still have that subtle Asian momness of not listening to what your child is saying in terms of like, this is hard for me. And then brushing it off, like, and saying like, oh, well, like when I was your age, like I was able to do all this when I was homeless or I had like $5 in my pocket. Why can't you do this? And I'm like, wow, this is such like an immigrant.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Vera also like, several times says, oh, young people are so dramatic, which you're also very dramatic, Vera. You're also very...
I do love how she tells, like, when she like brings all of the suspects over for dinner, or not dinner, breakfast. Like, she's just like, okay, like, Ricky, meet Sana, like, and we're now going to go over to Julia's house. Oh, you guys are my suspects, but don't take it personally because, like, it's like, don't take it personally, but also I made you my suspects because I'm judgmental. And I was like, okay, reverse logic. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it was really amusing to see, like, just how quickly she has everyone wrapped around her finger. And I mean, I think it makes sense because all four of these characters are missing something or had life like beat them down and are missing the type of like strong arm encouragement that an Asian parent or Asian auntie can provide. And I mean, the source of their issues all lead back to Marshall. He was like, I found it amusing that Marshall as a character had no redeeming qualities. Like everything about him was just bad, and there's just no sympathy for him, right? In any of his interactions, he exploited Ricky and made him create a scalping bot for him for his NFT grift. He stole Sana's artwork for those NFTs, and he like emotionally abused and gaslit his wife and probably his daughter as well. And Oliver had to live his entire life with him and be like, this was kind of like a very Asian drama storyline where like there was a twin brother / sibling who was blamed for all the family's problems, and Oliver was that person in his family. Like his dad blamed him for his mother's death, and his brother took advantage of that and to become the golden boy.
Yeah, like all of the characters definitely have their issues with confidence, and it's very clear to see that Oliver, like, his lack of confidence stems from like him thinking that he is not as charismatic, not as lovable as Marshall is, because Marshall is considered like the golden boy to his father. And because Oliver was the favorite son of his mother, the dad and his twin are just like, it's your fault. So, I can see.
I mean, Oliver himself feels like it is his own fault too, which is why he accepts everything.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see as the book went along how even though Vera was actively investigating all four of these people as her murder suspects, she also was helping them all come out of their shell, right? Like through her auntie meddling, helping them with their confidence, helping Sana draw again, helping Oliver be more confident in himself, helping Julia around the house as she got back on her feet. I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah, and I loved how she went about taking care of Julia, who, she has a 2-year-old daughter, Emma, who is like very attached to her, obviously, because her father wasn't very present. And there's a lot of like negative skittish energy with the two. And Vera just comes in like a freaking storm and is like, hey, I'm going to take care of your kid. I'm going to like make sure that she eats all this good food while you have time to like go job hunting for photography. Like for the longest time, Julia's just like, oh my God, like I don't have, like my husband is dead. Like he's been covering all of our like finances. Like how am I going to pay for a mortgage? And Vera's just like, well, there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom, but it sounds like that wasn't what you wanted this entire time. So what's stopping you from going back into work? You're talented at photography. Why don't you just start small? And it's like, I thought it was such a I guess it's like a tough love moment in a way because it's like you're kind of being shoved off of a tree branch, but sometimes it works. Sometimes that method of just do it.
I mean, also just having the support of someone as strong as Vera, right? Because all four of our characters, they're all isolated in some way, right? Like, honestly, all five of our characters are isolated in some way, right? They all like it turns out the aunties we need was each other all along, right? Like Vera essentially became the support systems that they were missing in their actual lives.
Vera, as pushy, as judgmental as she does listen. Like, even though she pushes her own opinions onto others, I feel like she does give them space to express themselves. And that is like the difference between Sana's mother and Vera. They're able to kind of understand like, okay, I don't relate to the problem that you're having, but it's clearly bothering you. So let's figure out a way where you can dispel all of this like negative energy inside you.
Yeah, and I guess in some way they're offering her the opportunity to auntie someone because her own son doesn't seem to need her, right? And maybe it's because she did her job too well, right? He is a lawyer at a firm, and he doesn't seem to be in the place where he's missing that support because I feel like he's always had it, right? And throughout the book, he starts getting concerned because his mother stops texting him, and like that's what drives him to like check in on her, right? But the four suspects, quote unquote, they all need that support, and Vera provides that. And throughout the book, we also start to get the inkling that Vera needs them too, right? Vera needs like purpose because underneath that auntie bluster, she is a widowed empty nester with like a failing business, but refuses to admit like that decline.
Yeah. And also like Vera just has like a very compassionate heart. Like even before she meets the other suspects, like with Alex Chen, who her sole customer who comes to the shop, like she, takes the time to brew like the tea that he needs in order to like, because she believes that he's taking care of his ailing wife who has Alzheimer's. And she's like, okay, this is the only time when he has like a moment to just take care of himself. So I feel like she is like very loving, very giving. And like you said, her son, Tilly, he had that his entire life. So when she kind of disappears for a while because she's taking care of other people, he realizes how lucky he is or how lucky he was to have had that support system his entire life.
Yeah. I mean, I think hidden in this heartwarming, funny murder mystery is like also that message that you should check in on your parents sometimes. They may annoy you, but they're still, and maybe this doesn't apply to all parents, but for the most part, I think they are on your side and they are rooting for you. And more often than not, they do have the best intentions. They just might not be good at expressing it or expressing in a way that, doesn't annoy you.
Yeah. And I just love, we keep mentioning found family, but just, I feel like everyone, especially nowadays, is just so alone. We're so isolated, not even in terms of just like working remotely, but I feel like it's so hard to make meaningful relationships nowadays. And it's just so hard to, like, if you're a parent, the responsibility of just like doing everything yourself is just like it's just like dumped onto your shoulder. And reading this, it just like really made me think, wow, like if we had Veras in our lives, if we had like more strangers, more neighbors who are like kind enough to just, help shoulder the loneliness, like how much better off would we all be? And yeah.
At the same time, if we did have a Vera in our lives, I feel like we, like Tilly, would also not be able to recognize it because we'd be so annoyed by all the constant auntie attention.
I feel like I could have used, I could use a Vera right now because I definitely feel like Sana, who is going through like an artist block. I'm like, I feel like I've been on an artist block for the last like 10 years. I would really love to have a Vera just like just like kick me into gear and be like, it's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes is like all part of the learning process. Just, like, and like provide me with like delicious food so I don't ever have to worry about like starving.
You heard that,
myself.
Books and Boba listeners. Vera has given you permission to auntie her online.
But the problem is, I too have a very like auntie-like spirit. I don't like being told what to do. So it's very much like I need to find someone who is more aggressive than me, and not have myself want to kill them in the process. It's always going to be very hard.
I did enjoy, now that you mentioned it, the food scenes. The way that Jesse wrote the food scenes was very, very like I can taste it in my mouth. And the fact that like Chinese food takes like to do it well takes a long time to make, and to have an auntie like to wake up at 4 a.m. and cook for 4 hours and create a feast for you all the time. It was very relatable that all four of our characters are people who are isolated and have their guard up, but their guard instantly melts, collapses, falls apart in the face of auntie food.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a comforting aspect to home cooked food, especially home cooked food that took a really long time for them to make.
Yeah.
I feel like with like it's the same with like my family. I feel like my mom doesn't really cook as much as she used to when I used to live at home. But like when I do go down, she's just like, oh, now it's an opportunity to just like spend extra hours like making something that I normally don't make, because that is the way I express love. So I don't know. There's something very like comforting about knowing that someone took time and energy to make food that's actually like very healing to you. So I don't know. Like I feel like everyone can use a Vera in their life, no matter how annoying their nagging can be from time to time.
Yeah. I did appreciate that Jesse gave Marshall 0 redeeming qualities. I'm glad that we were able to just hate him without reservation.
I mean, yeah, Vera was saying like, oh, like just because you're a killer doesn't mean that you're a bad person. And I'm like, you're absolutely freaking right. Some people do deserve to be killed, and some people do kill for, like some killers are actually good people. But, again, like good intentions, bad execution, or something like that. I just thought that was like really funny. Her being like, Marshall was a bad person. Like he's the type of person who would do drugs and would like would be abusive to his like family. And I'm like, wow, like you don't even know this guy, Vera. Like he showed up dead in your tea shop, and you're having all of these all of these judgment calls. But she's absolutely right in that regard. Marshall was a trash human being.
Yeah, and every character, I did like how their stories were all intertwined, right? Like. Ricky and Sana were both connected to Marshall's NFT grift, and Oliver and Julia were connected through like their past, right? Like Oliver. And what did you think about that? Like it was not exactly a love triangle, but like that like kind of romantic childhood crush entwinement between Oliver, Marshall, and Julia.
I don't know if I was really behind the love triangle part, although it did like make a good conflict towards the end of the book, where Julia's like, this is a little bit creepy that he's been writing a manuscript about me and like like having like an obsessive crush over me over all these years. But I did like that relationship between Julia and Oliver being like, he sent presents to his only niece. He really wanted to like get to know her, and like that relationship not being like he wasn't able to nurture that relationship because of his twin brother isolating. And
I kind of wish that they explored that aspect a little more. I feel
me
like
too.
That was kind of missing from that conflict, because obviously Julia was angry that Oliver seemed to be harboring this like long-standing grudge. But they never talked about how Marshall was the reason why they had no contact with each other, right?
Yeah, I wish that was more of like the conflict that was shown on page. And also just like, I wish I had gotten more like Oliver and Emma scenes because, it's like, Emma is traumatized because her dad was not very present. And here's a guy who looks almost exactly like him. So I think it would have been a good relationship to develop even more in the book. But
and it seemed like they were kind of like kindred spirits, right? They were both more the introverted type, like the type that needs like a quiet corner. And the few scenes that we did get between Oliver and Emma were pretty sweet.
Yeah, the tent was really sweet. I was like, oh yes, like an adult who understands a shy, anxious child's problems. And like it just reminded me of, now that I'm also quote unquote an auntie, like I have nephews and nieces now. So it's just like, it's a very special relationship. And, as someone who, have their own childhood traumas, you don't want the next generation to go through the same thing. So you try your best to kind of foster confidence and love and support that you didn't have when you were growing up. So I felt like that was a little bit missing from the book. But like the manuscript, I was like, oh God, I actually know exactly how that feels because there was someone back in college who did write me into one of their assignments, and it was so creepy and cringe. And I'm like, imagine going through an abusive marriage and then having to read something like that.
At the same time, no one was ever meant to read that manuscript either.
Yeah, no one was meant to read that. It was fiction. It was, it was not meant to see the light of day. It was clearly like a therapy project.
And Vera kind of made that conflict happen. And I think that's
I love how she just took his manuscript. I'm just like, wow, like auntie behavior of just like, no idea in terms of privacy.
Yeah, I mean, she's doing such a great job kind of healing their wounds, but also creating other conflict. And like we mentioned originally with the taking of the USB drive, like she kind of creates her own problems, right? And then doesn't take responsibility for it. And it all comes to a head at the, in any other murder mystery would be considered, I guess, the parlor room scene, right? Where all the suspects are gathered in one place and the detective cracks the case wide open. Except in this book, because Vera is not exactly the best detective, it all falls apart, right? And this chapter was really, it was sad. It was sad to see like all these friendships and found family like break apart because like all the lies that they've been holding on to come out in the open, right? Instead of like solving the case, everyone kind of just falls apart.
Yeah, like funny thing that you mentioned the parlor scene, because I feel like the parlor scene happens like 4 times throughout the book because she tries to make it happen. And I'm like, you haven't solved the case yet. So it's a little bit strange that like all of your suspects are in the same room. And it is funny, like the second to last parlor scene, like she thinks this is it. I've solved the murder, but she didn't. And everybody just leaves and things are just kind of left destroyed pretty much.
I mean, didn't she say something like, I don't know who the killer is yet, but in this climactic scene, I will know by their faces.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I am a Chinese mother. I can sniff out guilt. I will just do this by instinct. But it is like one thing that was like really funny to me was just like, because she's like, oh, like Sherlock Holmes, I have to like make it like dramatic. I'm like, I don't remember Sherlock Holmes having parlor like scenes. It's usually Poirot.
Yeah, she's getting her detectives
like,
mixed up for sure.
I was like, and Miss I'm surprised that Miss Marple's not up there, but it's like a Chinese grandma. Obviously, like their references for world-class detectives are not as wide as ours in terms of knowledge. But
yeah, it's a Rakakuni thing. It's just they all get amalgamated into one detective, right?
It's like, yeah, Sherlock Holmes, the detective with the mustache, and like it's sometimes just like wrong.
But I think. But this
But
is
she
also
destroyed her shop.
Yeah,
She
this is when we
destroyed
find
her
out that like
shop.
she spends the entire book saying how young people are so dramatic when she like destroyed her like she create like when she like literally like staged a robbery in order to like stay at Julie and Emma's place. Like that is probably the most dramatic thing we saw in this entire
That
book.
is the most manipulative thing that like she has done in this book.
Yeah.
But like her reasoning is like, oh, but somebody did come into my shop and did like go through my stuff. But because it's not obvious enough that like there was someone in my shop in the middle of the night, I'm going to make a bigger mess so that it looks like I was in danger. And
I would have been mad too. Like,
and like just the
kidding
fact
me?
that like she's like, oh no, like don't report it to the police, like they're really bad at their jobs, like they're gonna ask if anything was stolen and nothing was stolen, so what's the point? And I'm like, I do agree with you there, because like they're not gonna do anything even if you do report it. But the fact that she was the one who destroyed her own shop and told them not to report it, I was like, oh God, like,
yeah,
what a mess. And then like the officer finding out like later on, just like what has been happening behind his back, what has been happening behind her back was just so funny to me. Being like, she's telling people that.
Yeah, that poor officer. I mean, she's doing her best. I mean,
Officer Gray is doing
I feel like
her
she's
best.
actually doing a pretty decent job of trying to investigate and following up and doing things by the book. It's just that book is not a book that Vera Wong has read.
Yeah.
But the blow up at the dinner party leads us to, I guess, the depression arc, I guess, in the last in the last few chapters, where the auntie facade of Vera Wong like falls apart, and she has to admit to herself that maybe she was wrong. I did feel bad. I mean, I self-admittedly I was waiting for this moment of like auntie catharsis, because we all dream of the moment when the auntie admits that she's wrong, right? But it was also kind of sad to see like when it all falls apart, she's just a sad, lonely woman who just needed something to hold on to.
Yeah. And, you know, this is when she gets hospitalized and all of her found family members come together, along with Tilly, her actual son. And
yeah,
I just thought it was so funny how, like everyone's just like, you need to take care of your mother better. And, you know, them and like Tilly being like, who the fuck are you guys? It's like, what have I missed in the last, like, month of stuff happening?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she did spend the entire book complaining about how her son never calls her and stuff. So all of her found family probably doesn't have the best impression of Tilly.
No.
But I think it was pretty heartwarming to see like her found family rally around her, right? Like they're still concerned about her. Like she still is someone who did provide them with a lot of comfort and healing, and that's how family is, right? You get mad at each other, but like after a few days you cool down, and then you're like, okay, it is what it is, we just have to accept it. And the fact that they all came back and rallied around her, it's cheesy, but it's also, I think it's couched in reality, right?
Yeah. And also, like, you know, with Sana and Ricky, for example, like they're now a couple, and Sana finds out that Ricky was partially responsible for you know, her art and other people's arts being stolen as NFTs. And it's like, yeah, like you did this terrible thing, but does that make you a terrible person or just a person who made a terrible choice? And is this thing just like, do we like, am I going to make this a deal breaker, or are we going to move on from it or grow from it? And I feel like that last quarter of the book, like everybody is like learning that they are not perfect. Like Vera is not perfect. They themselves are not perfect, and that people should have grace for each other. And, you know, forgiveness is a choice. And I thought that was like a pretty good like message towards the last half. So I think you did get the catharsis that you wanted in Tao A for Aunties in this book.
Yeah. And thinking about it now, Marshall as like the shithead in the middle of everyone's problems was also kind of a stand-in for many like cultural vices, right? Like for Sana and Ricky, he kind of represented capitalism and how they exploit, poor, desperate people. And with Julia, he kind of represents like toxic patriarchy and how they exploit and manipulate people.
And then with his father, that was like a big reveal at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Marshall's father, Marshall and Oliver's father, it turns out to be Alex, the regular customer of Vera's tea shop.
Yeah. What did you think about that reveal and the later reveal that Alex was actually the killer? And the fact that this happens in the second to last chapter, or like literally the last chapter before the epilogue, when the story remembers there's still a murder mystery to be solved.
I mean, I think it's very on brand of Vera Wong, right? She's like, I'm going to solve this murder, but first thing is to like take care of Julia and all these kids who have no idea what they're doing with their lives. And she kind of gets sidetracked. So obviously us as readers, we get sidetracked. But when the autopsy report said, hey, Marshall, wasn't murdered. He died because of an allergic reaction to bird dander. Like, I was just like, bird dander? Huh. I mean, like, that sounds like an ingredient in Chinese tea. Like, why aren't anybody looking into that? And when is this gonna pop up? Like, when is it gonna pop up
that there's bird nest tea? Like, there's even Vera
I was
didn't
thinking
realize
about
it. Vera thought it
Vera.
was ducks.
Yeah, she thought it was duck or pigeon, and I'm just like, you run a tea shop, lady, with some like weird ingredients. Like, surely it would click in your brain at some point. But this is how you know that she's not a good detective.
Yeah, I mean, Vera has tunnel vision. It's not in her wheelhouse to think outside the box. But I actually did suspect Alex as the killer pretty early
same
on.
here.
There's the scene after the murder where Vera visits Alex at his place and notes that he's like looking a little haggard. And that's where I started piecing together, like maybe Alex was the killer. And I kind of suspected that he might have been Oliver and Marshall's dad. But they did have that red herring about his wife that I was wondering if he like remarried or something. But no, they explained that away in the ending. But yeah, I mean, I felt pretty smart when he was revealed to be the killer because I was like, I knew it.
Yeah, like I had a feeling that he was the killer because bird dander, nest tea. I was like, okay, that's the weapon. And who's in the tea shop other than Vera? It's him. So I kind of pieced it together like pretty early on. And I did suspect that he was Marshall's dad. But like you said, like the red herring kind of like threw me off with like the wife. And I was like, oh, is this a situation where he's the one with dementia or Alzheimer's? Like, is he like confusing himself with like these different realities? But I thought it was really sad when, the group, they go to confront Alex at his apartment. And Alex says how he went to go see Marshall the day that Marshall died. And it was like his first time seeing his son without his mask on. Like, he's seeing like how awful he is to other people and how like this good son act was always an act. And it wasn't even him who would like drop by his apartment with groceries. It was actually Oliver.
Yeah.
And it was just really tragic.
At the same time, though, I guess he must have been real blind not to see how big a piece of crap his son was. And at the same time, Marshall also, like, dropping his mask was such like I don't know. I guess he didn't think his dad would do anything about it, right?
Yeah, because he's the golden boy in his, like, father's eyes. And the part that was, like, really sad to me was when Alex recounts, like, what Marshall said about Emma, his 2-year-old daughter. Yeah. How, like, he's like, oh, like, she's a freak. I'm gonna just, like, I'll just like make another baby that's normal. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I can see that being like a catalyst for murder. And yeah, it was just like, it just like hammered home how like awful of a human being he was, how he didn't see people as people, even his family.
Yeah. I mean, like we said many times already, Marshall was a character with zero redeeming qualities, which I'm okay with. I don't need a sympathetic backstory on why he became a total shithead. Just leave him this way. It's easier for me to be okay with his murder.
Yeah. And also there's like that catharsis of like, oh yeah, like Alex was a terrible father to Oliver because obviously he, you know, put all of his favoritism into one child and blamed his spouse's death on a different child. And it's like, wow, you've caused a lot of trauma. You caused a lot of your own problems. But now they're at a state where it's like, okay, like, obviously I was wrong. And, you know, we need to move on from this in some healthy way. And speaking of moving on, I did not expect him to go to fucking jail because I thought it was just going to be like, okay, well, Marshall's dead and like no one really wants Alex to go to jail, so let's not report it. And Oliver will get away with, you know, no charges because Tilly is a good lawyer. You know, like,
yeah,
I didn't think they would actually send Alex to prison.
I mean, Vera Wong, she doesn't do anything halfway, right? When she solves a murder, she solves the murder.
But I feel like Vera has like that, no, she's not 100% lawful, you know? So I thought she would just be, I thought she would just be like, okay, well, like, no one is missing Marshall. Like, he was a bad person. And, you know, like, who's it gonna hurt if Alex goes to prison?
I guess in the end, you and I, not as good a person as Vera Wong.
No, I'm just saying that I feel like that's a little bit out of character for Vera because to be perfectly honest, I might be more on the lawful side where I'm like, you're going to fucking jail. But Vera, though, I feel like she should have just let it slide.
No one needed to go to jail for the murder of Marshall Chen.
No.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, what is it? Murder on the Orient Express, where it's like the person who gets killed, it's like no one likes him. Everyone thinks that he's better off dead. And
I would have that would have been an interesting conclusion if everyone was in on the murder.
You know what? That would have been an interesting conclusion. Huh. But I'm glad that everything worked out. This was it had murder in it, but it was a feel-good book. That's what cozy mysteries are.
You say feel good, but again, very visceral reactions to all the auntying going on throughout the book.
I guess. I mean,
I don't know if that really made me feel good.
I feel like that's more on. That's a you problem.
Yeah, it is a me problem for sure. But on the other hand, it was nice to read a story about people coming together and healing from trauma,
having second chances in following their passions, finding someone who, you know, can be their support network, and people, you know, taking care of each other. It's always nice to see because we see so little of it in our real world.
And auntie catharsis. Finally, thank you, Jesse Hughes Santanto, for providing that for me in your book. I sincerely appreciate it.
There's a line in the book that I thought was really funny. It was, people always say that your wedding day is the happiest day of your life. But honestly, people should try solving murders more often. And I'm like, and I was like, this is true. I find a lot of joy in going through cold cases and doing internet sleuthing because I'm a nerd. So
I did feel pretty smug when Alex was revealed as the murderer. I was like, I knew it. Yeah. It did feel good.
Yeah. I mean, weddings and murders are like my two favorite topics in books. So the fact that Dal A for Aunties was like one of my favorite books that I read like 2 years ago, like it makes sense. But yeah, like Jesse's books, they're always like such a joy to read. You're always in for like a good fun time, you know, even when things get bloody.
Especially when things get bloody. Before we wrap up our discussion, do we have any feedback from our club members?
Yeah, so we have a comment from Julie from Goodreads. And she said, Vera was a lot at first, and it took until she started interacting with her suspects to really grow on me. This was way more of a found family story than I expected, and parts made me laugh out loud, like the page in her notebook after the cause of death was revealed. I definitely agree. Those notebook chapters were really funny. And she said, I suspected either Oliver and Marshall's father or Alex, parentheses, hiding in plain sight, but I couldn't figure out his motive outside of maybe Marshall crossing him and Lily. I immediately went back to check that early conversation Vera and Alex had about their sons. Sneaky. I did too. I did check. Like, I went back to the beginning of the book to read like what he said about Marshall and Oliver.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the fact that he used their Chinese names, that's when I was convinced, like, Jesse is obviously obfuscating the fact that this is Marshall and Oliver that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Vera was a lot, is a lot. And I actually do hope that this becomes a series. I can see more Vera Wong.
Really?
mysteries.
I feel like it to me, it's a standalone book. I don't want a sequel because, one, I don't think Vera is that great of a detective. Just because she has good, like, people reading skills does not mean that she's a good detective, as we could see from this book, how she didn't know who the killer was during her third, fourth parlor room scene. And I just, like, I like the ending. I like how her tea house got renovated. Yeah, rejuvenated. And she has, like, this new family. She's living in this new house, taking care of a kid. She has a purpose now. I don't feel like she needs to solve murders.
I guess it's true. Family was
She's not
the
a Miss
murder
Marple.
suspects we had all along. And she got Tilly to come and talk to her again. So everyone wins. All right. And on that note, I guess that'll do it for our discussion of Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse Q. Sutanto. As you may have noticed, we had a really great time reading this book and really appreciate Jesse Q. Sutanto for writing it. If you have any thoughts about this book that you'd like to share, please let us know on Goodreads, or if you are a Patreon subscriber on our Discord server. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback on both our podcast and the books that we read. I guess moving on, Rira, for the month of May, what are we reading for book club?
So for APAM this year, we are reading The Fortunes of Jaded Women by Carolyn Huynh. And this book is about a family of estranged Vietnamese women who experiences mishaps and unexpected joy after a psychic makes a startling prediction about their lives. And this family apparently has a curse because one of their predecessors got married for true love, and therefore everybody else in that family have been cursed to never find love or happiness or ever have sons. So it has some magical realism to it, and it's set in Orange County, Little Saigon. So this is an area that Marvin and I are sort of local to. So it'll be interesting to read the setting in the book.
Eager to see if there's any familiar places that will appear in the book. But as always, if you already finished the book, please let us know your thoughts on either our Goodreads forums or our new Discord, which you can access if you're a Patreon subscriber. And again, we really appreciate it if you would join our Patreon and help support Books and Boba and our future endeavors.
And we also have an online bookstore. We're an affiliate with bookshop.org. And all throughout this month, they're going to be offering 20% off select titles by AAPI authors. So if you look on our bookshop page, we have a bunch of different lists, and a lot of those books are on sale. So now is a great time to purchase those titles. And 10% of those, 10% of your payments will go into independent bookstores all across America, and another 10% will go into this podcast. So every little bit helps.
Thanks to everyone who has supported us through our bookshop or Patreon or our merch. We really do appreciate your support. But with that, actually, before we go, we will be at the Festival of Asian Books at Long Beach, which is being hosted by both Hanso Books. on Saturday, May 13th. So if you are in the area, please stop by and say hi, and we'll have bookmarks and stickers for anyone who stops by our table. So we'd love to see you there. Well, with that, that'll do it for this episode of Books and Boba. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey Ryan, what's black and white and red all over?
I don't know, Ramen. Two nuns having a chainsaw fight?
Dude, inappropriate. Come on, man. This is supposed to be a podcast promo for our secret underground podcast, Quarantine Comics.
Oh, yes. Quarantine Comics, the weekly comic book club where I, ace reporter Ryan Joe,
And I, mild-mannered Ramen Sentinel,
team up to discuss some of comics' greatest works.
or just some really cool comics that we've been wanting to read.
From Alan Moore to Uzumaki,
From Arrakis to Zendaya,
from Adrian Tomine to Jean Lun Yang.
you might not have heard of half the stuff that we're reading.
Or the other half is just pop culture superhero stuff.
They could just read the books with us, Ryan.
Yes, they could do that, but you could also just send us money.
No, Ryan, that's not how passion podcast projects work.
Why in the hell are we even doing this?
I'm sure we'll be back by next week's episode. So, tune in each week to Quarantine Comics. That's qtdcomics.com. Set phasers to fun.